I bought my first truck. I bought it thinking that it would make my life a whole lot easier, but since I just bought the cheapest diesel that I could find on Craigslist, it may have ended up making my life a whole lot harder instead. This thing is currently broken down 600 miles away, and I think it's time to go get it. I just bought a one-way plane ticket to go pick this thing up, and it's gonna be my only way home. I didn't mean to buy a non-running truck. When I saw a 1-ton diesel, extended cab, extended bed pickup truck on Craigslist for only $3,000, I had to have it, but this price may have been a little too cheap. The Craigslist ad said that it ran, and when I went to go look at it, the test drive went all right. But I didn't get 50 miles away before it started misfiring and then surging like crazy. I bought it originally thinking that I was going to be able to use this thing to move my house all the way from Idaho to Colorado, but after I saw how it ran, it was very clear to me that it was not going to make the trip, especially not pulling a trailer with my whole house in it. I ended up just renting a U-Haul and leaving the thing in Idaho. It's been a couple months since we've moved, and it would really be nice to have this truck here. We moved into this tiny little cabin in the woods, and we don't even have garbage services here. That means that every week I take our stinky, smelly garbage from the week and shove it into my partner's tiny little Subaru and drive it to the dump. This is pretty gross for the occupants of the vehicle, but I also think that this little Subaru deserves better than to be turned into a dump truck. I'm also left with no easy way to pick up big 8-foot by 4-foot sheets of material. Whenever I need to get a sheet of plywood, I have to cut the thing in half and then strap it to the roof of the Subaru, and that's really not optimal. And then if I needed to actually pick up full sheets of sheet metal for any of the fabrication I do, this method wouldn't really work. What I really need is a truck. And I already have a truck, so I need to go get that stupid truck. The engine that's in this truck is a 6.5 liter Detroit diesel. People don't really love these engines. The one thing they're really good for is fuel economy, and the one thing they're really bad for is power. I thought the reason I was getting this truck so cheap was because nobody wanted this engine, but given how it's going so far, maybe I shouldn't have wanted this engine either. It's really difficult to diagnose a vehicle that's 2 states away that you can't put your hands on, but I think I figured it out. I think it's the injection pump going out, but I can't know for sure until I actually put my hands on it. I'm gonna take the risk though. I packed my bag with a new injection pump, a factory scan tool, and all the other parts I could think of that this thing might need, and then boarded a plane and a couple buses and headed back to Idaho. This truck was being stored at the business that my parents own. The body's in pretty good shape, except for the bed, which definitely has some dents. The tailgate really has the worst of it. But overall, I actually think it's a pretty good deal for $3,000. Well, assuming I can actually get it working, that is. One great thing about this deal is that it's a twofer. If I get the truck home, I also get my motorcycle home. I went to try and start it and immediately had my first issue. Haven't even started working on the car yet and already going for my first parts run. Both the batteries are dead, I needed to buy some jump packs, and needed a few gaskets. Unfortunately, diesels take a lot of juice to start, and I couldn't find a jump pack or a good pair of battery cables that would do the job. Ultimately, I just had to let it charge on my brother's car for a while until it would start itself. This whole endeavor killed about 2 hours. I was already getting really nervous about time.
Whoa, I didn't know this. This actually has a... Ooh.
Thankfully, the thing actually started. This thing starts rough. It's not like it's even cold outside, it's like 50 degrees, and this was a smoky mess.
Oh my God! The rattling's normal.
Also, listen to how this thing idles. It sounds like it has a giant cam in it, and it is not supposed to sound like that. Thankfully, my parents had some space in their warehouse where they were gonna let me work on this thing, so I wasn't gonna have to work on it out in the cold. So before I did anything on this, I plugged in the GM Tech 2 factory scan tool, and I have a P1218 code. Injection pump calibration circuit. So I pulled off my PMD, the computer that drives the injection pump. I have it relocated down to the front bumper like everybody does. And take a look in there. There's supposed to be a calibration resistor in there, and there is not. I don't want to get too excited, but it's possible that that little resistor is the whole issue. There's supposed to be a little circuit board in this connector that tells the injection pump how much fuel to put in. This resistor was completely missing. This could be why the injection pump was having issues. My new injection pump has the resistor in it, so I just simply plugged in the computer on the new pump to see if that made any difference to how this thing runs. I couldn't believe it. This thing was already running way better. I thought I was going to have to replace the entire injection pump, but it turns out it may have just been the calibration resistor. That would be incredibly lucky. I'm going to take it for a test drive just to make sure. Okay, actual freeway. Yeah. And there's a motorcycle in the back, but that shouldn't make a difference. These are not known for having a lot of power. There was no stumbling, the idle was smooth, this thing was running great. This little resistor may just be enough to get me home. This could also explain why it ran well during the test drive. Fuel calibration only takes place every 50 drive cycles or so it's possible the previous owner installed a new PMD or lost the resistor and the truck didn't notice until I put some real miles on it, and that's when it's really started running bad. This is why when you're troubleshooting electronically controlled engines, you should really have a good scan tool. If I didn't have a good scan tool, I would have replaced the entire injection pump without realizing it was just a little resistor in the computer. Now don't get me wrong, this thing is not perfect. The injection pump timing was off, it felt like it didn't have enough power, and the 4-wheel drive wasn't working, but replacing the entire injection pump is a big job, and I was running out of time to fix this thing. It was running good enough at this point that I figured I would roll the dice and see if it would make the 600-mile journey home, despite the fact that it still had some issues. The next morning was bitter cold and foggy. It was time for a real cold start. A cold start like this would definitely test whether or not this thing is actually running well. That wasn't actually too bad. It was a little smoky, but it started with black smoke and quickly moved to white. That's what you want to see on a cold start because black smoke is partially burnt fuel, whereas white smoke is condensation or unburnt fuel. It looks like my little calibration resistor fix is holding up. It's crazy because this started easier today in 15-degree weather than it started yesterday in 50-degree weather. This gave me hope for this engine. Well, holy shit. I got to test out the brakes on this thing because I had to slam them about as hard as they would. We went to stop traffic after a 75-mile-an-hour road, and it turned out the reason why is because there was a car on fire in one of the lanes. I'm really glad that isn't me. I don't think I've ever seen a car actively on fire in the middle of the freeway before. That was really interesting. Drive safe. Don't keep flammables in your car. Make sure your electrical's not sketchy. Stay safe. As we drove south through Utah, the weather warmed up quite a lot. And finally, so did the truck. It took me about 3 hours of driving before this thing ever got up to operating temperature, which means there's probably another issue going on with the engine. It shouldn't be a problem for this trip though. It was a little painful to drive right past Moab and not stop in, but I swear, I will be back to Moab sometime soon. There's a certain Cummins-swapped Explorer that's dying to hit some trails. As we crossed into Colorado, it started to get cold again. My next biggest concern for this truck is that we're starting to hit some snow. The four-wheel drive on this thing is not working, so if we get any snow on the road, I'm a little worried about it. It doesn't help that I'm headed straight for Eisenhower Tunnel on I-70. This tunnel is 1.7 miles long and sits at 11,000 feet. It was the highest elevation tunnel in the world when it was created, and it's still the highest elevation tunnel in the US. If there's anywhere that I'm going to get snow, it's going to be here. Here's to hoping the broken four-wheel drive doesn't cause any issues. Luckily, the roads were clear, and the only snow I hit was when I pulled into my driveway. I'm not out of the woods yet though. There's still a lot wrong with this truck that I need to fix. I'm absolutely ecstatic that this thing got me home, but I needed to do more than that. I needed to be reliable, I needed to be able to get through the Colorado snow. It's time to actually do all that work that I put off doing when I was in Idaho. This truck still needs a lot of work. It is woefully underpowered, even for a Detroit, and over the 600-mile journey back to Colorado, it averaged 13 miles per gallon. That is about half what some people claim they can get with these engines. Power and fuel economy are two really good performance-based indicators of how your engine's running, and this one's not doing so hot. On top of that, Colorado has emissions testing, and I'm pretty nervous that this thing will not pass emissions. The first thing I did was measure fuel pressure, and I was hardly getting any. Started off by installing a new fuel lift pump. It still wasn't running how I thought it should, so I decided I better bite the bullet and do the big job. This truck has 200,000 miles. It's not a bad idea to just replace the injection pump. Once I got it out, I was really glad I decided to do this. The old pump said 1997 on it. It's possible this pump has been rebuilt, but it's also possible that it's almost 30 years old. It was definitely time for this pump to be replaced. While I was working on the engine, I found this broken vacuum line on the turbocharger. The way the electronic boost control works on this engine, no vacuum means that I was getting no boost. It's as if the entire time I was driving this, I didn't have a turbocharger. Replacing this vacuum line should make a really big difference. I also figured out what was wrong with the four-wheel drive. The front drive shaft was broken. I had been really nervous that I was going to have to rebuild the front end or do some other big job, but luckily all I had to do was replace the front drive shaft. I'm really glad that I didn't try to fix all this stuff when I was back in Idaho, because it took me 3 full days of work to fix all this stuff. I did not have time to do that when I was in Idaho. I got really lucky that all this thing needed was a resistor. That was enough to get me home, and then after that, I could do all this work to this thing in my own garage where I had all the tools and everything I needed. This revive and drive really wasn't so bad. I was taking a big risk getting a one-way ticket and relying on this truck to get me home, but it did just that. And now this thing is running great, it has four-wheel drive, and I'm able to use it to do truck things. This is a really big step up from trying to use the Subaru to do this stuff. For $3,000 plus maybe another $1,500 in parts and tires, this was a really good deal for me. I'm going to get a ton of use out of this truck. If you're thinking about doing something like this, but you're nervous about the amount of work that it would be or the risk in going and picking up a vehicle like this, I would say just go out there and do it. Have the adventure. Put in the work, make your life a little easier. I had a ton of fun with this. I'm really glad to have this truck. It was totally worth it. I'm glad I did this. Thanks for hanging out with me in my truck today, and I hope to see you next time. Get out there and build something.